What's going on YouTube? It is your girl Laura Finesse and we are back. And y'all, I'm tired. Okay, I've had such a long week, a long day, a short weekend, because the weekends are always short, right? But today I went to brunch and then I went for a hookah. I went for brunch, I went for hookah, and then um, one of the girls that I know from Chicago, she's moved out here, so I actually like dropped her off. She lives like super far. Y'all, it's 113 degrees outside today. So, but anyway, before we even get into all of that, I want to say if you are new here, please go ahead, like, comment, and subscribe. And if this is your second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth time here, welcome back. I welcome you with open arms. Yeah, y'all, today has just been such a long day, and my week upcoming is gonna be so long. Even though it's a short week, I think everybody's off for Juneteenth. I'm definitely off for Juneteenth, and then I took Friday off because I'm flying into Chicago Thursday night. So I know next weekend is gonna be crazy, okay? With going back home to Chicago for my cousin's wedding. So I was trying to take it easy this weekend, but y'all, today was the day and I am exhausted. And the only thing I'm looking forward to, one of the things I'm looking forward to tonight is my skincare routine, because I'm about to like really hit it. But anyway, all that aside, just catching y'all up. Y'all know we got to do our house cleaning items. That's not why y'all are here. We are here to talk about the Titan Submersible and the Netflix documentary that came out this past weekend. Y'all know I love me a good Netflix documentary. Y'all know that's my thing. But before we get into that, I watched the Netflix documentary on this on Friday, and then yesterday, Saturday, I saw that HBO Max had one that was produced by Discovery. And I'm like, why would both of these documentaries come out the same day? Like, well, why, what are we doing? So I watched both because I wanted to see which one told a better story, what angle did each of them take. So I watched both. I didn't need to because there was some of the footages that were like overlapping, but they definitely had two different angles. So I'm gonna just talk about the Netflix one, and then I'm gonna briefly talk about the Discovery one because I watched the Netflix one first. So the Discovery one was really a lot of regurgitation of the same information. They did have some different nuances, but for the most part, the story is what the story is. So the one on Netflix is called Titan, the OceanGate submersible disaster. Now, if y'all don't remember this happened back in 2023, which I was like, has it been 2 years already? That's insane. But back in 2023, if you were under a rock, that's the only way that you would have missed this submersible. And you remember the news stations were doing like countdowns of when these people were going to lose air because they had lost communication with the base or whatever. And so, you know, people were looking for Stockton Rush, who is the CEO of OceanGate. There was this billionaire, a French explorer. He was rich. I don't know if he's a billionaire. French explorer. He was on there. Paul Narjolet. He's French. You had a Pakistani father and a son, and then you had Hamish Harding, who is he's also a billionaire. So basically a bunch of rich people, right? And we knew that because I think the ticket to get on this thing to go underwater and view the Titanic from the submarine or submersible was like $150,000 per person for this tight space. So you know I gotta talk about the cinematography, right? So when it comes on, it's like a horror movie, okay? Because it comes on and they're riding on the waves, and they're this actual footages. throughout both documentaries, they are playing actual footages of what was going on in the different dives that Stockton Rush did. But it's coming on, and it's like, you know, they're in the water, and then you see the Titan, and then they pull up to the Titan, and these people get on, and then they close the hatch, which is like bolted in, right? They're like bolted, twisted in, and they go under. Now, of course, this isn't the filming of the actual dive. I think it was dive 83 or 84, which was the last dive of the Titan, where it imploded. Now, the Netflix, the way that it's being shot, like I said, it's almost like a horror movie, and in a sense it is. But the gist of it is this: there were a lot of people who knew that the Titan submersible, because it was made out of carbon fiber, right? Normally it's made out of steel, but that was Stockton Rush's whole, that was his whole claim to fame for this submersible, was because he was going to be using carbon fiber, which is a cheaper material. But carbon fiber is exactly that. They are carbon fibers, like shoestrings, like intertwined mesh. You know, it's not like steel. Steel is a solid. There's no like meshing there, like thread, right? That's how carbon fiber is. It's like thread, right? It's threaded fibers. And they were saying like that wasn't a really good material to use, but he was so hell-bent on using the carbon fiber because that was going to be his getcha gotcha. That was going to be his claim to fame. So they had done many dives and tested the Titan, and they would also do these pressure tests of the carbon fiber. And what would happen is there would be this loud popping sound. And that's basically, the popping sound are the fibers snapping, right? But they don't just snap like, I mean, they eventually will snap like this, but they snap like, you know, like piece by piece, I guess you want to say. And so it was like the director of engineering, and then, because he had hired a whole team, right? He had hired a team. There was this woman who was like their accountant. She had sought them out because she was really into diving. And basically he put together this like rock star team, but they all were finding faults with with how the Titan was built and the material, and they voiced it. But apparently Stockton Rush, and I'm not going to talk ill about the dead, like I don't want to be that way, but in the sense of who he was and who the people around him portrayed him to be, he was an asshole. He was a cocky, arrogant, rich asshole. The Netflix documentary talks about how Stockton Rush, two of his ancestors signed the Declaration of Independence. So he comes from a long, long, long line of just privilege, if you will, okay? And then his wife, her ancestors were actually, her great-great-great-grandparents or something like that were actually on the Titanic. They actually died on the Titanic. And they owned the parent company, which we know today as Macy's department store. So both Stockton Rush and his wife come from money. Like, they come from money. They are well established and always have been. So when I'll say when Stockton Rush is wanting to pull this program together, and I think he graduated from like Yale, I believe, like Yale or Princeton. He graduated from an Ivy League with an engineering degree. But he was well off. And because he had all of these resources to continue to build the submersible, and that's the thing that I didn't get. That's the part I didn't get. He was rich. His wife was rich. If the carbon fiber isn't working, and you know it's not working because they put an audio device to track the pops of the carbon fiber breaking down as the pressure increased as they went under. And it was like 4,000 meters or something like that. And it was, I think to get the Titanic was probably like 37 or something. and he kept wanting to go lower and lower and lower. Um, but what I didn't understand is they had all this money. I don't understand why they couldn't just rebuild it with a material that works. But then that goes to how everyone described him. Everyone described him as someone who he wanted to be the smartest person in the room. And he wasn't going to take your suggestions. And if you went against the grain and went against what he said, you would get fired. He fired his director. He ended up firing one of his like lead pilots that was, you know, driving the submersible, because they were pushing back and they were writing reports and, you know, flagging all these governmental agencies to say, hey, someone listen, like this man he's going to put a lot of people in danger. He should not be, you know, given a green light to continue with this program without some, you know, reworking. So it was just a mess. But I do want to say this. So going back to the beginning a little bit, and we're jumping around, so just follow me. In the beginning, and I wrote this down because I was like, this is insane. So when it comes on, right, and they show that group of some of his crew, they're getting in the submersible and they're being like bolted in. He tells the people in the submersible, he's like, there's nothing in here that is going to warrant an immediate response. So if you hear alarms or anything, the best thing you could do is nothing. And I said, what? This man was really kind of whacked out. So basically, what I believe he was referring to is the popping of the carbon fiber, because it was like a loud popping sound. Like imagine you being in, you know, a tight space and you just hear, you know, your, I don't know, whatever's holding on, you hear it breaking. That's basically what was happening. The submersible was breaking. And so anyway, so they, like I said, they interviewed a bunch of people. They had like a group chat of some of the people who used to work there, and they immediately were in the group chat like, we knew this would happen. I knew it was OceanGate. I knew it was the Titan, because they were constantly testing the submersible. They had like a chamber where it would replicate the pressures as it went deeper and deeper into the ocean. And so they had plenty of submersible, test figures, or, you know, to scale figures of what the Titan would be, that kept imploding in this pressure machine. And so they were saying to him like, hey, one, the pops are happening because it's breaking. We need to find another material, or we need to build it again. So so there was like this YouTuber who was supposed to go on a dive, but they went out to the sea, because that was another thing. He was also he was a slickster, he was a shyster, he was a little bit of a shyster, because they were building the Titan in the US, right? They were building it, I think, in like Boston and Connecticut, right? And then they were taking it to Canada, to the shores of Canada. And then from there, they were going out to the universal seas, basically, like, it's the world sea. It doesn't belong to anyone, right? And then they were taking it out to like the middle of the sea that didn't belong to any jurisdiction. And that's where they were doing the dives from. Because if they were doing it in Canadian waters, Canada would need to approve. They didn't have those approvals. They couldn't have done it from the US waters, because the US would have had to go through so many steps to get approved, and they just weren't approved. So he found a loophole of, you know, the submersible was built here, so it technically belongs to the US because the US built it. But then, like I said, they went out, they took it out to Canada, and then from Canada to the sea is where they would deploy from. And so anyway, they were saying, how could this happen? Why didn't anyone stop it? Ultimately, there was a ship, and I think the ship was called the Prince or something. What was it called? The Polar Prince. That's the name of it. So basically, the Polar Prince is the ship that transported the Titan submersible from the shores of Canada in the international seas. And so that's how he kind of got around it. Now, on one of the dives that they did, there was a YouTuber, and I forget his name. They took him out there to do the dive, and the water was just like, it was just like a bad day, like, you know, weather-wise. So they didn't do it. And then there was the very next dive was the dive where the people died. And so the guy was just like, wow, he was like, that would have been us. But the weather was so bad, we didn't go under. So they interviewed him or whatever. But going back to there were so many people that were in the submersible. So they had done successful dives before, but he just wanted to go deeper and deeper and deeper. And I think that was the issue. And so one of the directors, the one that he basically was telling Stockton Rush, like, hey, this is not a good idea. It's not going to work, right? And he wrote a report and basically flagged all of the things that were wrong. And they had a meeting, and Stockton Rush basically fired him. And he's like, you don't see the vision, and that's fine. We're thinking outside of the box, and you just don't get it, so you're fired. So he went to make a formal complaint. And of course, when he made the formal complaint against the agency that he made the formal complaint with about him, I guess they had to be transparent in who was bringing the claim against them. So Stockton Rush knew who it was, but he was telling people within his company, like, hey, I have no problem paying $50,000 to ruin someone's life. So they were really scared of him. So the one guy who was sort of the whistleblower, that's what they called him. In the Netflix series, all of the people sort of had like these nicknames: the whistleblower, the insider, the director, the diver, you know. So the whistleblower, he was gonna fight the case, but he just could not afford to continue this court case against them because Dr. Rush had all this money. So he ended up like removing his case against him, and you see what happened. But for one of the last voyages that they had on the Titan submersible, they went, and you can see like the past 3 dives, they had the audio visual chart, and the pops just kept getting like louder and bigger because basically it was breaking. And it just is so insane that this vessel was breaking, and he didn't. It's just like he was so blinded with wanting it to work that like all logic was out of the window. This was his true passion project, and he just didn't care. He just did not care. But before they even got there, at one point they flagged like, hey, I forget who it was, but there was somebody that had went on a voyage. And well, there was a comedian guy, I forget his name, but there's a comedian guy who has this like exploration show, and he was gonna get on. Now this is from the Discovery documentary. He went there to do a piece on Stockton Rush, and they actually got in the Titan submersible, and they were like, wait, this is just being bolted in with like 4 bolts. It's like, yeah, you're fine. And then they like went underwater and nothing was working. And so the guy was like, he was like, I don't think Stockton Rush understood how badly it went. The radios weren't working, the thrusters weren't working. There were so many things that weren't working. And it's just like, you were continuing to invite people on this vessel that was breaking at every turn. Now at one point they did rebuild the Titan because there was like a noticeable crack in the side of the submersible, and it was just like, there's no way of getting around that. There's a noticeable crack. And so they had to say something, so they had to do something. So then it took them like another 2 years for them to go back and rebuild it. And then the newer one that they rebuilt, they went down, they did a few dives, and that's where the 3 audio visual things where the cracks just kept getting bigger. And then on that 4th dive, before they did the 4th dive, they actually kept the Titan submersible over the entire winter at like in a parking lot in like Newfoundland, right? Because that was their like port. They actually kept it there. And the one thing about carbon fiber is when it breaks and it tears, if water gets into it, that's only going to erode it more and more and more because of its carbon fiber. So like the it was there frozen. Newfoundland is very cold, so they left it there. It had been in water, so like the water froze, and basically like ice, right? When water is frozen and it is ice, if something hits it or something, it's going to crack and break like ice. And so they left it sitting there. So of course, when it was going to be thawed out, it's going to start having cracks and breaks. And then they took it out, and he took those people money, and they got on the submersible. I think they were on it for a few hours, and then they lost communication, and it imploded. It imploded. And it's very sad. It's very sad. I think the teenager who was on there, you know, that just such a bad decision by the father, you know. And maybe he really wanted to go, or maybe he just wanted to make his dad happy, who knows. But you know, putting your child in such a high risk situation that just isn't even necessary is insane, you know. So anyway, so that was really the Netflix documentary. The Netflix documentary basically had text messages and were from the top directors who worked there, who were saying, we kept telling him that this was going to happen, and no one did anything. Now, over on Discovery is a little bit more messy. I'm going to say this. Discovery is a little bit more messy. So I told y'all about the comedian guy from the Exploration show. He, like I said, he was recounting his trip and how nothing worked and it was terrible. It was, you know, whatever. They also talked with some of the people who used to work there, and they didn't have the same people. So I thought that was very interesting. Like the group of people that they interviewed for the Netflix is not the same group that they interviewed for Discovery. But it was basically the same story. It's just the Discovery one was just, it was a bit more messy. I don't know, something about it was a bit more messy. It was the angle was very clear that they were making Stockton Rush out to be this, you know, genius who was blinded by his own arrogance. And the Netflix one, there was more of a human side to the Netflix one. Like the Netflix one was a little bit more warm. Like if you watch both, you'll understand exactly what I'm saying. What else? I guess basically that's it. Oh, one thing that I learned from here, y'all, please don't judge me. Please, I am a smart lady. I promise you. But y'all, I did not know that Jacques Cousteau was a real person. I thought, because you know, Jacques Cousteau was like an explorer, used to go underwater, things like that. I thought Jacques Cousteau was a character from a book. I didn't realize that was a real person. I thought that was like Huckleberry Finn. You know what I mean? Like I genuinely thought it was a character. So I learned a lot, but I learned something. So shout out to me. The news stories, you know, the news love a salacious story, okay? They had that timer at the bottom of the screen every day, all day. It was an ongoing counter of when these people would lose air. It was, you know, they turned it into a movie. That's what the news will do. They will turn your life or death situation into a blockbuster primetime slot. It's crazy. What else? So at the end of the Discovery documentary, because there was a guy, Neubauer. Now he was the one guy, he was on both documentaries. He was the Coast Guard sort of, the Coast Guard prosecutor, if you will, because of where they didn't know who to claim for the submersible because of, again, it was being launched in international waters, but they launched from Canada, but it was built in the US. So he was the guy to come in and sort of unravel how this happened, how he slipped through the cracks. So he's on both documentaries. But there was a part where they were collecting what was left of the submersible, and one of the Coast Guard women who was on the case, they had a piece of Stockton Rush's uniform. You know, he was the one that had the patch, and or his pin. I don't know if it was here or here, but they said they found it, and it was like it was like sand, blood, and guts, and his pin from his jumpsuit, the OceanGate jumpsuit. And I was like, man, that's crazy. The good news is, well, not the good news, but the brighter side is they're saying, you know, definitely these people died instantly. They surely never knew what was coming. The thing is, I'm sure they were terrified, because those loud pops that you could hear, I can't imagine sitting in a tube and I'm hearing it pop and I'm knowing it's breaking and we're still going down. And I imagine they were telling him like, okay, we need to go back up. But the thing is, it really didn't matter. Like, once the thing started to break, it didn't matter the depth, it was already broken. So it was, you know, going to implode at some point. The same as they did with the mock version one that they were testing. Also, the comedian guy, he brought up a really good point about the mechanics and how the Titan was built. You know, there wasn't like there wasn't a hole at the top. There wasn't an opening at the top like a submarine, right? You open the top, you can only get in and out from the front, that little round piece cylinder at the front. And that's just one way in, one way out. It was a perfect storm. Rest in peace to the people that lost their lives on that voyage. I understand that they just wanted to see something amazing. They wanted to see the Titanic. You know, there have been dives to see like the Androdoria, which is like another ship that, you know, sank and things like that. Not as many deaths, obviously, as the Titanic, but, you know, they just wanted to see it for themselves. And I'm sure whatever they saw was amazing, but it definitely was not worth their lives. And Stockton Rush was a mess. He was a mess, but, you know, rest in peace to all involved. And yeah, let me know, did you guys watch it? Did you watch the one on HBO Max by Discovery? Did you watch the Netflix one? I say watch both. Honestly, it won't hurt. It's two different angles of the same story, but the message is clear that Stockton Rush just was not a nice person. He wasn't someone that would listen, and this was his live stream, and it just sucks that he took other people with him. Voluntarily, they wanted to go, but it just sucks that, you know, he didn't do more to prevent that. So let me know what you guys think. Let me know how you felt about it. Let's talk about it down in the comments. And yeah, I'm about to get my skincare. Y'all see this thing got dark. And then I'm about to go to sleep and start my week, child. Ugh, a week. It's going to be a short week, a short holiday week, but I'm tired already. So I'll see you guys in the next one, y'all. Bye-bye.
I'm doing rich shit.